Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It's Cynicalex, and today I'm bringing you another X-Men character review, this time looking at Eric Lehnsherr, the Magneto, the villain of this latest update. And Magneto is a pretty curious character because he has a very strong tier 2 passive and he has very cool, interesting skills. However, I was underwhelmed by him at tier 1. So I do want to make that distinction for you guys. I think at tier 1, Magneto is an average character at best. I think he really shines when he gets that tier 2 status and he becomes a huge threat, especially in player versus player interactions. And we'll explain why that is a little bit later. So jumping into his skills for Magneto, you can see that his first skill is just a regular attack. It's got an iframe, which is good. His second skill reduces all defense, which is good for dealing more damage to the enemy. It also has a kind of vortex pulling effect, kind of like Sharon Rogers' fifth skill, the Vortex of Nightmares. So that's a good crowd control skill for Shadowlands. His third skill is a true crowd control skill with a 3-second bind, which is fantastic. Also an iframe. His 4-star passive is quite unique. It deals damage in a 3-second interval as long as they're close enough to Magneto. So as long as you stay close enough to the enemies, it's going to deal lightning damage. And that lightning damage will be amplified by either Lincoln's leadership or an obelisk that has lightning damage on it. So that is pretty cool, and we'll talk more about that a little bit later when we talk about the obelisks. Then we have Magneto's fourth skill, Magnetic Storm. This one has a guard hit. So this is a fantastic skill to level up if you have the gold. When it's leveled up to 6, it will give you 8 guard hits on 8 seconds, which is premium. And that's a good skill to use frequently. And then Magneto's fifth skill gives him an all attack, all defense, all speed buff. And this is the one that rains down the meteors, or sorry, not the meteors, the cars and the motorcycles from the sky, and the taxis and the cop cars. And it also brings those pillars up from the ground. This is a fantastic skill to just cast and move on because it will deal residual damage. Looking now at Magneto's tier 2 passive, you can see why he's such a beast when he gets that upgrade. Increased damage dealt to human players or characters 80%. That's a massive number. It's kind of like having She-Hulk's leadership plus 25%, but instead of being against males, it's against all human types. This is especially powerful in PvP scenarios when you're facing off against the likes of Doctor Strange and other very popular human-type characters. It's not so powerful against the Black Order and things like that because they're considered alien, so they don't fall into that category. But for the ones that do, Magneto is a huge threat at tier 2. In addition, he also has a buff to skill damage and bonus damage, and debuff effects like this one will last longer, and their effect will be amplified by 10%. So that is excellent. So he'll bind you for longer, he'll reduce your defense for longer, and he will completely punish hardcore human characters that he's facing off against. And that's why I highlight his utility in PvP scenarios. I think he's going to be a monster for Alliance Conquest, and I've already had guys in my Alliance, shout out to you, who have showed me this firsthand with his CC as well. As far as skill rotations go, I would say there are two primary ones for Magneto. If you want to be safe and defensive, you want to open with the 4 to get that guard hit. You want to go into the 5 to get that residual damage started. Then you want to go over to the 2 to get that CC effect or that defense reduction. Then over to the 1 for the iframe, and then to the 3 for the iframe again, and then back into the 4. If you want to be more offensive minded, and if you have the opportunity to do so, I would try to open with the 2, especially in a PvP scenario like Timeline, to get that all defense down, then into the 5 to get the damage, then into the 4 to protect yourself, then finally into the 3 for the bind and the iframe, and then the 1 for the iframe as well. That's a little bit more risky, but as long as you rotate kind of steadily through 2, 4, and 5, you should have a decent amount of damage, protection, and iframe. So it's very fantastic, but it's good because Magneto has kind of a fluid skill rotation. You don't necessarily need to start with one particular skill, the 4 being the most popular in most situations. As far as Magneto's gear, he's got energy attack and attack speed, all defense movement speed, skill cooldown, and crit damage. Skill cooldown being a fantastic stat to see, especially for newer players who are investing in Magneto. and then crit damage and ignore defense. Ignore defense on the secondary slot means that you may or may not need to give him more ignore defense on Uru or an Obelisk, but we'll talk about that later. Of course, as always, you want to roll HP per level and HP on the third one, all defense, and then energy defense for the first two on the second gear, and then energy attack per level, and then energy attack or all attack on that first gear. The fourth one, again, is going to be whatever you need. I think most people will roll ignore defense, but you could also roll something like skill cooldown if you really need it, although you shouldn't. And then if you want to give him more offense, potentially you could give him crit damage to boost up his crits, but it's not as valuable as some of these other stats. As far as Uru goes, I think that the best option for Magneto is to build him more defensively because he's not a burst damage character in any right. So I would still give him 2 energy attack Urus, but then I would strongly recommend you give him 2 HP Urus. So that's going to fill out 8 of your slots on each gear. And then for the last one, I would give him whatever he needs, whether it's crit damage or ignore defense or skill cooldown, something like that. You shouldn't need attack speed because he gets that buff on his 5th skill, and a lot of his skills, have kind of a short animation for their casting. As far as an Obelisk goes, again, I wanted to go defensive with the Obelisk because I don't see a damage proc really being super effective with Magneto. None of his skills individually deal a lot of damage and spike, but it's just that constant damage that he deals from his 4-star passive, from his 5th skill. It's that residual buildup of damage, small kind of dot effects, damage over time effects that he has that really make him powerful when they're all working in conjunction. In order to amplify the conjunctive effect of his different skills, I would recommend an Obelisk that has something like immune to guard break, lightning damage, and then invincibility. That would kind of be the ideal Obelisk because the immune to guard break will protect him from getting knocked out of his skills. The lightning damage will increase his 4-star passive, which actually does decent damage, and then the invincibility will allow him to stay alive longer. Alternatively, you can go for something like max HP, lightning damage, 5 seconds of invincibility, but I think those are the best obelisks for Magneto to maximize his effectiveness because he just needs time, and so that invincibility on the obelisk will buy him extra seconds to deal more damage, to snare you, to cast his shield for the guard hits, and eventually pull out that victory. As far as the ISO 8 set goes, I do have an offensive set because I'm not going to use Magneto for now in PvP scenarios, so I was just testing him out in World Boss and stuff like that. But I think if you want to make the most out of a defensive Magneto set to make him a true threat for PvP, you should go with something like the motorcycle in the form of either binary power, which gives an HP shield, or drastic density enhancement, which also gives an HP shield but is a little bit more offensive with the all attack and the crit damage and the ignore defense. I do think that at the end of the day, binary power is going to be the ideal set for him. It's got max HP, all defense, the attack speed helps, and the recovery rate is not so good, but that's okay. But I think either one of those sets would suit him well. Of course, if you want to go offensive, Power of Angry Hulk or Overdrive is also good for him. Where to farm Magneto is a little bit more different because he doesn't show up as frequently or as readily as some of the other X-Men. Of course, if you have the deluxe pack, you will be able to farm him from the mutual enemy mission, and you'll get his bios pretty readily. You'll also get his bios once you buy the deluxe pack from the story mission. They're given as additional biometrics that you get. So if you start and you're kind of halfway through the story mission and you've saved up enough crystals to get the deluxe pack and then you buy it, you will get hit with a swarm of Magneto bios that will let you put the character into 1-star and then maybe mega rank up or whatever the case may be. But otherwise, he doesn't show up in the game as a shifter, or it doesn't show up in other game modes, so you're going to have to save up those crystals if you do want to get him. New York, probably. We've seen a few missions in New York, right? Yeah, the third skill is an iframe. What's going on? He gets them from Korea. his energy attack, yeah. I don't think the glove is made of, Well, the volume went weird for a minute, for a second. Damn. That was... Should have put in an Uber. That was a bit tough. Overall, I think that Magneto is a strong character who has some very interesting abilities and passive effects that make him a formidable character, but he does need a lot of love to be built properly. If you just slap on a damage proc obelisk, if you treat Magneto like all the other Blast characters that have kind of vanilla stats and vanilla skills, he's not going to do so well. I mean, it's very attractive to see something like 45% all attack on his leadership, but Magneto is so much more than a leadership character. He has the potential to be a very strong PvP character and still be a decent addition to your Shadowlands clears and to world boss clears. But I do think in the coming months we are going to see some insane highlights from Magneto in PvP scenarios, and if the game were to ever develop a more serious PvP scene, I do believe that Magneto, with his consistent damage and his ability to iframe and guard, would be a huge threat, especially considering that he has that 80% damage to all human types, and we're going to get more human types, we know, so he's always going to have that relevant tier 2 passive, and it's unique to him. So let me know what you guys think of Magneto. Let me know who you want to see next. It's basically Beast or Storm at this point before we get to Wolverine. And of course, guys, if you like what you see, I hope to see you again tomorrow. Take care.